What I just read to you is the prologue to John's Gospel without later additions. In this form, the prologue is a song, a hymn. The scholar Ernst Hähnchen calls it the Logos hymn. Most translations use word for logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. That's very familiar, isn't it? Yes. Hähnchen leaves the Greek logos. Logos cannot be adequately translated into English. It contains much more meaning than word. It includes the concepts of thought, message, report, discourse. It also contains a metaphysical significance, capturing the divinity of the word, God's self-revelation. If we read the beginning of John's Gospel as a hymn, the mystical poetry of the words and images make it a glorification of the cosmic Christ. The Christ who was already in fellowship with God before God created the world. The Christ who is the manner, the method by which God created the world. The Christ who brings life to the world. We read, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. Christ the Logos has a parallel in Old Testament thought. It is wisdom, Lady Wisdom. The first reading today is from the book of Sirach. It describes Lady Wisdom as coming forth from the mouth of the Most High and covering the earth like a mist. She travels everywhere in heaven, the underworld, the sea, and the earth. Hähnchen identifies her as somebody who is seeking a place to stay. Wisdom is homeless until God shows her a place of belonging with Jacob and Israel. In a similar way, we learn in John's hymn that cosmic Christ was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world knew him not. Logos was seeking a home, a place where he would be understood, but he had to become human for humankind to understand him, to grasp him. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. Eckhard von Hochheim, better known as Meister Eckhard, lived from about 1260 to 1328 in Germany and France. He was a Dominican monk, a theologian, and a mystic. He wrote a beautiful sermon on this passage, which has been published in Meister Eckhard, Selections from His Essential Writings. Meister Eckhard reflects on in the beginning, the opening words in the Gospel of John, the following way. In the beginning, God has eternally born us, all of creation, of the concealed darkness, the eternal concealment, the first purity. We all were born by God out of everlasting rest in hidden knowledge, remaining unspoken within. For Meister Eckhard, the darkness at the beginning is everlasting, pure, and full of unspoken knowledge. We read in the gospel text, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not comprehended it. And this is, by the way, also the translation in the King James Bible. And the darkness has not comprehended it. When we read that, we can see that the earth and all that is on it was not created against the darkness, but out of the darkness. The darkness already contained all wisdom, all beauty, all joy, just unspoken, not yet formed, not yet visible, and not yet understood. God creates the light to make visible some of the hidden wisdom, beauty, and joy, which is part of the eternal divinity. The Greek word for light, phos, comes from phao, to shine or make visible, especially with rays of light. Light shines in the darkness to illumine God's eternal truth, which would otherwise be hidden to us. This is one of many images St. John evokes in his gospel for Jesus. Jesus is living water, bread, vine, light, gate, shepherd, the way, the truth, and the life. John focuses on Jesus coming to earth in human form to make accessible God's eternal truth for us in ways we can understand. The darkness is where God dwells eternally. The light is how Jesus illumines our path to God, our connection with God. We read in the gospel text, "For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And in Jesus Christ it can be received. The hymn tells us so. And from his fullness have we all received grace upon grace." I wish to point to two other hymns in the New Testament about Jesus. They can be found in Philippians 2, 6-11, and Colossians 1, 15-20. The hymn in Colossians is our second reading for today. It elaborates on this theme of Jesus as creator. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Other than the Johannite hymn, this hymn ends with a reference to the cross. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of the cross. All the fullness of God dwelled in Jesus, says Paul in the letter to the Colossians. In the Johannite hymn, it is the fullness of God's grace and truth, which we have received in Jesus. The word fullness in Greek is pleroma. It can also be translated as completion. We have already received God's grace and truth in Jesus, and God is already reconciled to us through the blood of the cross. There's nothing we need to do to make that happen. There's nothing we can do to prevent it. It already is, and it was, and it will be. The hymn in Philippians is much better known than the one in Colossians. It stresses the immensity of the gift of Jesus becoming human and thereby mortal. We read, "Let the same mind be in you that was in Jesus Christ, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave." The unity between God and Jesus and us is ultimately beyond understanding. There are no words which can fully describe it, but the language in hymns, songs, and poems helps us grasp at least part of this wondrous, mysterious, awe-inspiring unity. And Jesus, as a little baby whom we celebrate in the season of Christmas, is quite likely the most relatable form of Christ for us. Today is the last day of Christmas. I invite you to enjoy little Jesus in the crib over there and the variety of manger scenes displayed in the narthex. Tomorrow, the season of Epiphany begins. During that time, we will ponder further about how Jesus reveals himself to us. What insights we can gain from biblical scenes which show us more and more about Jesus' true nature. Will we ever understand completely God, Jesus, Spirit? I don't think so. But I know that we can understand enough to feel safe and secure in Jesus' loving arms, now and forever. Amen.